Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
While we did get some laceless upper variations of the F50 Tunit dating back as far as 2007, what we never got was a laceless version of the F50 Adizero, that is, until now, even though this new one's technically not an Adizero. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Adidas F50 Elite Laceless. Basically the same as the laced version, minus the cutout through the middle, the laces themselves, as well as the tongue compression fit system. All of that is swapped out for a one-piece upper construction with some elasticated prime knit filling in the central portion of the upper, which in this limited edition Fast Reborn launch colorway retails for $270. However, if they follow in the footsteps of the crazy fast once general release colors start coming out, I wouldn't be surprised if the price tag dropped to $260, exactly the same as the laced version. Where if you're into the whole laceless football boot thing, you're probably pretty excited about these, and honestly, they're fairly solid as far as laceless football boots go, but I think the more important question is how do they compare to the laced variation? In other words, is the new F50 better with or without laces? That's exactly the question that I hope to answer for you in today's video as we go over all the main differences as well as just the general fit, feel, and performance characteristics of this new laceless F50. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, obviously this launch colorway has sold out, but when new regular release colorways do become more readily available, you'll be able to pick these up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via that first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy these brutally honest, unsugar-coated reviews, make sure you leave a like on the video, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, it's important to note that with this new laceless F50, all the core elements of the laced variation remain intact. It's still a fiber touch textile based upper, it still has the sprint web micro texturing on the surface, it's still a low cut design with the same heel liner, the same insole, the same external heel counter, which is of course part of the new Sprint Frame 360 sole plate and stud pattern. All of that is identical between the laced and laceless variations of the F50 Elite. Your main differences are going to come in what's happening across the top of the foot, as well as some very minor differences in weight, which we'll take a look at in just a second. With that said, despite so many things being the same, because of this laceless fastening system, the overall fit of the boot, the lockdown, the responsiveness, and generally the experience does end up being quite a bit different, and I'm not so sure, unlike the laceless Predator this time around, that they've really taken advantage of the fact that this doesn't have any laces in a way that is meaningful to the overall experience or performance. It's definitely cool to look down on your feet and not see any laces, and of course also not have to worry about the laces coming untied, but do we genuinely believe that these super thin laces backed by an even thinner microfiber material are taking away from your ability to feel and or control the ball? I suppose that's a matter of personal opinion, but if you're asking mine, the answer to that question is there's no real benefit here. First off, it's important to note that these definitely do feel different than the laced variation, which might be surprising because it is pretty well the exact same upper. Even the reinforcement through the midfoot, while it's very difficult for me to show you because it's extremely dark in there, does not appear to be any different on the laceless model, despite, you would think, requiring a little bit more structure given the fact that you do have that kind of compression fit system inside of the laced variation, but I guess that just goes to show how little that compression fit is actually doing in terms of stabilizing the upper. Of course, there is an element of compression from this elasticated prime knit that runs through the entire middle of the upper with a little bit of a tab here giving you that extra F50 logo. And yes, it does have some nice tension to it. It stretches easily enough, but not so much so that once your foot is inside the boot, it's kind of constantly stretching as force is applied. It does have enough tension to feel like your foot is relatively secure. However, the tension is very much focused right around this area of the foot, where through the midfoot, kind of forefoot, as well as toe box area, even in the heel, there's just significantly less lockdown, and in general, the boot doesn't wrap your foot quite as closely as what you'll find from the lace variation, simply because you don't have the ability to adjust the shape in any way at all. And that's fine. I would say that's almost an expected trade-off when it comes to laceless football boots, but in my opinion, if you're going to trade away the quality of the fit, the lockdown, as well as the responsiveness, even if it's to a very small degree, there has to be some upside to removing the laces. And in the case of the F50, that just doesn't exist. And as an example, even though it's not the most extreme difference, I have the Predator 24 Elite, both in laceless as well as laced form. And if we look at the strike skin rubber elements on the laced variation, you can see it cuts off as you get closer to the lacing system, where on the laceless model, because the upper cuts a little bit higher up, giving you a slightly cleaner touch in this area of the foot, they also increase the height very slightly of the rubber strike skin, where technically you're getting more rubber, therefore more grip on the laceless model when striking the ball than what you're going to get from the lace variation. In other words, the same kind of downsides of the F50 laceless versus the lace variation still apply to these two boots. The lace model definitely fits a little bit better, offers better lockdown and better responsiveness, but at the very least, you're getting a slightly cleaner touch as well as some additional grip with this laceless model. Even if it's only a very small upside, at least you're trading something for the loss of lockdown responsiveness and adjustability. And I get it, there's definitely a market for laceless football boots in 2024, but I do think people that are fans of laceless boots in general need to start being a little bit more critical of what a laceless football boot should be, where it really does feel like this time around they've designed this football boot to have laces, and then because they can, they just made a laceless variation without really modifying the design in any significant way. Also, kind of a minor thing, but you definitely do notice it when the boots are on feet. If you look at the heel liner in neon yellow on the lace variation, you can see that microfiber with some padding kind of extends right to the edges of where the opening of the boot is, where on the laceless model, it just ends very abruptly and you have no real padding here, making the boot in general just feel a little bit stiffer kind of towards the front part of your ankle, more so than what you're going to find from the normal lace variation, which again, I would argue is just less comfortable. And then there's the weight, where there's perhaps the chance that because of this laceless design, they're able to shave away enough extra material to make the laceless version noticeably lighter than the lace model. Let's find out using a scale, both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the normal lace variation. They weigh in at 6.7 ounces, the equivalent of 190 grams. We'll change the scale back to ounces and we'll throw on the laceless model, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.45 ounces, the equivalent of 183 grams. So yes, the laceless F50 is technically that little bit lighter by a total of 7 grams, which is a very small amount of weight that's spread out across the entirety of a pair of football boots. You really don't feel in hand, and I would say especially on feet, just because of the difference in how these boots fit and feel. The tighter, closer wrap around your foot because of the adjustability from the normal lace variation makes this boot actually feel lighter than the laceless one, despite that not actually being reality. Outside of those construction differences, I think the core elements of the F50 Elite here are still fantastic. I love the new Fiber Touch upper in combination with the Sprint Web texturing. It's kind of a textile-based material where, compared to the last couple generations of Crazy Fast or Adidas X, I should say, this definitely leans towards being a little bit more knitted in terms of feel, especially as you break them in. It softens up and is definitely thicker than some of the thinner synthetics we've been getting, but still gives you that raw barefoot feel. There's certainly no element of padding here. It just has a little bit more of that kind of sock-like pliability, which personally I prefer. Of course, because you don't have laces across the top of the foot, it does arguably give you a little bit of a cleaner feel, or at least I think that's the perception a lot of people will have. Is that actually reality? I suppose that's for you to determine for yourself, but I think one of the more underrated features of this new boot is that sprint web material that you see highlighted in white running across pretty much the entirety of the forefoot as well as most of the midfoot. These little lines that make up this micro texturing that feel very rough and gritty to the touch, but genuinely provide a lot of extra grip on the ball in a way that doesn't feel sticky or in the way. It's really, in my opinion, the perfect amount of additional grip for an upper as thin as this is, and honestly very different than anything we've had previously on the F50 series and even in the Adidas X line. The inspiration is definitely drawn from the micro texturing, kind of matching up with the Jabulani match ball from the OG 2010 F50 Adizero, but this texture, I would argue, is far more significant in terms of its overall impact. Like I mentioned earlier, despite the laceless construction, the heel liner pretty much remains exactly the same as the laced model, lined in this microfiber material with plenty of extra padding. Historically, from Adidas, we have seen actually different heel liners on some of their laceless models. They have not done that here, which is a bit of a shame. Not that heel lockdown or comfort is an issue here, but it certainly isn't as good as the lace model. And then of course the insole fully removable. They do give you two sets, just like the laced variation, this being the speed model, which has this soft microfiber liner on the surface, some perforations through the heel, and it's made from a single layer of this white foam, where the comfort one that they include as an addition is pretty much the same thing without the perforations, as well as a little bit thicker foam, both of which feel almost exactly the same. And then as for the base, you're going to find the new Sprint Frame 360 sole plate tooling, which is definitely kind of a nod to that OG F50 Adizero, even though the Sprint Frame design originally introduced in 2010 never really left the Adidas brand. What you're going to find here is definitely something that's a lot more simple compared to what Adidas has been up to as of late in the last several generations of Adidas X, where there's no plate insert for the sake of responsiveness. Instead, it's just solid plastic all the way through, and admittedly just a lot softer and more flexible, giving you arguably more of that simple traditional sole plate feel, which for a modern day speed boot might be disappointing to a lot of people that really like that kind of springy, responsive feel. This definitely doesn't feel flimsy, but it doesn't have that same kind of spring back effect that so many other speed boots currently have, including the model that this replaces. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, you're gonna get blades in the heel, which is super aggressive, but you can see up front, you only have blades kind of closer towards the front, and then these four main studs in the forefoot are more so conical in shape. So they're really prioritizing kind of a more well-rounded stud pattern in terms of its performance characteristics. Not to say that it doesn't offer aggressive traction, but it definitely has that freedom to twist and pivot a little bit easier than the average pair of speed boots with all bladed studs. Of course, it doesn't dig in or bite quite as hard as something with blades all the way through. So again, it's kind of a decision that I think does tie this a little bit back to those earlier F50 models, where those triangular studs, while they provided great traction, certainly weren't the most aggressive thing in the world. So at the end of the day, it is a matter of personal preference. I really like what they've done here, but certainly if you want more bite to your stud pattern, this isn't necessarily the top option in the speed category. On feet, while I can't say that the laceless F50 feels bad, it does kind of remind me of a one-piece upper football boot that's supposed to have a lacing system, but for whatever reason doesn't. And I guess what I mean by that is they fit well enough. There's going to be a compression to a one-piece upper in general, especially when they fill in that central portion of the upper with an elasticated knit. But from a lockdown fit and just general shaping perspective, they just don't feel anywhere near as good as the lace model. And that is down to not necessarily having a different shape, but because you don't have the laces to bring in the upper to fit your foot that little bit more closely, you just end up with a boot that has much more empty space inside of the upper than what the laced variation has on offer. Also, all of the tension is very much focused kind of around the front part of the ankle or the upper portion of the midfoot. Through the heel as well as kind of the forefoot toe box area, the boots just don't feel nearly as snug or secure as the laced variation. Not to the extreme where I think that the boots feel sloppy on your feet, but again, if you're doing a side-by-side comparison, which I think everybody should, if you're on the market for a pair of speed boots, whereas part of that feel and performance characteristic that I think most people are looking for is lockdown responsiveness and kind of that one-to-one connection. You just don't get that to anywhere near the same extreme as the version with laces. Even when I bend my foot, I can just feel the upper pulling away through the forefoot, through the midfoot, my heel lifting a little bit. It just doesn't have that same locked down sensation as you get with the same football boot that has a lacing system. So for the extra 10 bucks especially, I really just don't see why anybody would pick these. And I strongly urge you, if you're on the market for the new F50s and you were considering the laceless model, please try on the lace version as well, because I guarantee you that 9 out of 10 people, once they just feel the way that the upper wraps their foot, they are going to probably reconsider. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that these are unwearable by any means, but I definitely think when it comes to the gold standard of laceless speed boots, this is nowhere near as good as that Adidas X Speed Flow Plus from a couple years ago. That, if you want a laceless speed boot, I thought was extremely impressive and actually made the laceless system a part of the overall experience, where here it just feels like the same football boot but worse. In terms of width, they're pretty well the same shape as the normal lace variation, but obviously without the adjustability. Because of the laceless design, they're just typically not well suited to somebody with really wide feet, but at the same time, if you like that snug fit, they should work well for most foot types. Of course, being laceless and not having adjustability, the specific shape of your foot is going to play a huge role in how well they fit or how poorly they fit. So if you do order these online, for example, and they show up and they just don't feel good, it's probably best to just exchange them right there on the spot, because it's not going to get better as you wear them in, just because you don't have that adjustability. So they'll work well for most foot types in terms of just fitting on your feet, but how well they'll actually fit your feet, like most laceless football boots, it's kind of just something you have to try on. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and just like the regular laced F50 Elite, I would definitely recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, and I'll keep things short and sweet, unless you A, can't tie your shoes, or B, are just in love and sold on the idea of a pair of football boots without laces, if you are simply after the best version of the new F50, you should be buying the version with laces. Where the laceless model definitely isn't bad, but it is worse for more money.